should take precedence. But depriving the elderly of food and water is done all the time. Drinks or food are put on a tray, and if the patient is too ill or weak to reach them, then they're taken away untouched. In most hospitals, no one bothers to feed patients who can't feed themselves. Meanwhile, the government pours money into vanity projects and wastes money on foreign aid programs, which result in crooked politicians putting billions into Swiss bank accounts. And they merrily subsidise the lives of the lazy and the work-shy to buy their votes. Healthy 30-year-olds sit around growing chip backsides and beer bellies, slumped in front of their high-definition digital television sets and opening the windows to let the heat out because it's easier than turning down the central heating. But the elderly are classified as the unwanted generation. Anyone of pensionable age is a political embarrassment to be ignored or dumped or killed. Elderly individuals facing blindness from age-related macular disease are denied drugs that might have prevented their blindness because they're considered useless and expendable. The theory is that they don't contribute and rarely vote and can therefore be disregarded. How have we managed to forget that in the 1930s the Nazis deliberately starved and dehydrated elderly and vulnerable patients because they were regarded as a useless burden on society? That's exactly what we're doing today. We're killing people off if they're old and can't complete an Ironman triathlon. The government has already given doctors the legal right to kill old people by starving them to death or depriving them of fluids if they're filling a hospital bed that the administrators want to use for a patient requiring cosmetic surgery or infertility treatment. So what's the next step? Well, the next obvious step is to kill off all sorts of patients with chronic or potentially expensive illnesses such as cancer and heart disease. How on earth could you do that? How could the politicians possibly get the voters to put up with that? Well, you could shut down the hospitals on the excuse that they're needed for the 8 million patients expected to fall ill with the coronavirus. It would be like introducing the death penalty by the back door, but we won't be killing the possibly guilty, we'll be killing the definitely innocent. You couldn't do that, of course, though, could you? Of course you could, and they have. In the UK, there'll be soon 10 million people awaiting hospital appointments and treatment. Nearly 2.5 million are currently waiting for treatment for cancer. Hospital departments are still shut because of social distancing, although there's absolutely no reason at all for it. We don't shut hospitals when there's a flu epidemic, and let me remind you, this is not as bad as a flu epidemic. What if it was all part of a plan to get rid of people who need treatment? What would you call it when a government decides to kill millions of patients who might need care and cost money? Genocide, perhaps? Is it part of the complete reset of our world, as talked about and enthused over by Prince Charles and company at the World Economic Forum? Why have things changed so much? Well, it's partly money, and it's partly eugenics. Bill Gates used to be very keen on eugenics, so I hear. It's all part of a wider plan, which I'll deal with in the future. Of course, getting rid of the elderly will remove a big part of the drug companies' profits. The elderly tend to take a lot of drugs. But the new leaders of our new world have solved that. They're making mass vaccination a must for billions. And unbelievable as it may sound, things are destined to get even worse. Governments around the world are deciding that because of the difficulty in dealing with what is now proven to be nothing more than a mild case of the flu, they can no longer treat the elderly at all. Many of the young may shrug at this with indifference, but they should remember two things. First, they may be old one day themselves. And second, the age regarded as old is likely to be subjected to the standard creep phenomenon. Those who don't much care about the elderly being killed will themselves be old sooner than they think. After all, young people, if they're lucky, eventually become old people, and they should remember that the definition of old is getting younger by the year. Governments have decided that the over 70s can't be treated, but in some countries the cut-off age is 65. And in 5 years they may reduce the cut-off age to 60. And By the end of the decade, the 55-year-olds will be lucky to receive a bottle of aspirin tablets if they have a heart attack or break a leg. This is a form of euthanasia, or maybe eugenics would be a better word, or population control. It was something the Nazis thought they were good at, but they were mere amateurs. You think I'm exaggerating? The BBC's junior fact-checkers will doubtless say I am. Perhaps I should remind you that since February I've been absolutely accurate with all my predictions for the coronavirus. Check my track record for the last half a century. It's on my website. Remember too that the BBC receives huge amounts of money from Bill Gates as well as the European Union, and much of the rest of the mainstream media has also been bought. And then decide if you think I'm exaggerating.